Hi everyone, I am Mark Crister Pibalbin and I'm here with you today to discuss the history of C++ programming and its basic elements. But before I start, I wanted to introduce first my members to discuss also the rest of the topic. Starting off with Khalid Babandus and Florian Anapi, who will discuss the examples in creating a program. And the next one is Emil Jan Antonio, who will discuss the control structure, and Janeric Frias, who will discuss the for loop, Vinzil Ancheta, who will discuss the while loop, Paul James Duque, who will discuss the nested loop, Joshua Bautista, who will discuss the arrays in C++, and the next persons are Carl Jesus Anticorda, Zaira May Balbico, and Janine Narciso, who will discuss to you our proposal in creating a C++ program in the subject Computer Fundamentals and Programming. Now let's start in discussing the history of C++ programming. So the C++ programming language has a history going back to 1979 when Bjarne Stroustrup was doing work for his PhD thesis. One of the languages Stroustrup had the opportunity to work with was a language called Simula, which, as the name implies, is a language primarily designed for simulations. The Simula 67 language, which was the variant that Stroustrup worked with, is regarded as the first language to support the object-oriented program paradigm. Stroustrup found that paradigm was very useful for software development. However, the Simula language was far too slow for practical use. Shortly thereafter, he began to work with C with classes, which, as the name implies, was meant to superset the C language. His goal was to add object-oriented programming into the C language. His language included classes, basic inheritance, inlining, default function arguments, and strong type checking in addition to all the features of C language. The first C with classes compiler was called CFront, which was derived from the C compiler called CBREC. It was a program designed to translate C with classes code to ordinary C. In 1983, the name of the language was changed from C with classes to C++. The plus operator in the C language is an operator for incrementing a variable, which gives some insights into how Stroustrup regarded the language. Many new features were added around this time, the most notable of which are virtual functions, functions overloading, references with the and symbol, the const keyword, and the single line comments using 2 forward slashes. In 1985, Stroustrup's reference to the language entitled the C++ Programming Language was published. The same year, C++ was implemented as a commercial product. The language was not officially standardized, yet making the book a very important reference. The language was updated again in 1989 to include protected and static members, as well as the inheritance for several classes. The annotated C++ reference manual was said to be a large influence to the development of the standard. The standard template library, which began its conceptual development in 1979, was also included. In 2003, the committee responded to multiple problems that were reported with their 1988 standard and revised it accordingly. In 2005, the C++ standard committee released a technical report. The new standard was informally dubbed C++ 0x, as it was expected to be released sometime before the end of the first decade. In the mid-2011, the new C++ standard, or the dubbed C++11, was finished. Some of the new features included regular expression support, a comprehensive randomized library, a new for loop syntax providing functionality similar for each loop in certain other languages, the auto keyword, new container classes, better support for unions and array initialization lists, and variadic templates. And now we are finished in discussing the history of the C++ program. Let us now move forward in tackling the basic elements of C++ program. So, a C++ program consists of various entities such as variables, functions, types, and namespaces. Each of these entities must be declared before they can be used. A declaration specifies a unique name for the entity, along with the information about its type and other characteristics. Now let's move on to the C++ data types. All variables use data types during the declaration to restrict the type of data to be stored. Therefore, we can say that the data types are used to tell variables what type of data it can store. Whenever a variable is defined in C++, the compiler allocates some memory for that variable based on the type of data type with which it is declared. Every data type requires a different amount of memory. In data types, there are three types that we need to remember. These are the primitive data types, the derived data types, and the abstract or the user-defined data types. So let us discuss first the meaning of the primitive data types. So these data types are built-in or predefined data types and can be used directly by a user to declare a variable. Examples of primitive data types are the integers, characters, the boolean, the floating point, the double floating point, the void or the valueless, and the wide character. The next one is the derived data types. So the data types that are derived from the primitive or built-in data types. And there are four types of derived data types, which are functions, arrays, pointer, and the reference. And lastly, the abstract or the user-defined data types. These data types are defined by the user itself. And examples of these are class, structure, union, enumeration, and type def, or the defined data type. And let us now discuss the primitive data types available in C++. As I have said a while back, the examples of the primitive data types are the integers, characters, boolean, floating point, double floating point, void, and the wide character. Now let us discuss them one by one, and let us know about their keywords and the bits that are used in the memory space. So let us first discuss the integer. The integer, the keyword used for the integer data type is the word int. Integers typically requires 4 bits of memory space. The next one is the character. Character data type is used for storing characters. Keywords for the character is the word char or the char. Characters typically requires 1 bit of memory space. The next one is the boolean or the bool. Boolean data type is used for storing boolean or logical values. A boolean variable can store either true or false. Keywords that is used for the boolean data type is the word bool or the bool. The next one is the floating point. The floating point data type is used for storing precision floating point or the decimal values. Keywords that is used for the floating point data type is the word float. Float variables typically requires 4 bits of memory space. And the next one is the double floating point. Double floating point data type is used for storing double precision floating point values or the decimal values. Keywords that is used for the double floating point is the word double. And the double floating or the double variables typically requires 8 bits of memory space. The next one is the void or the valueless. Void means without any value. Void data type represents a valueless entity. And void data type is used for those functions which does not return a value. And lastly, the wide character. The wide character data type is also a character data type, but this data type has a greater than the normal bit or the normal 8-bit data type. And it represents the word WCAR, and it is generally requires 2 or 4 bits long. And now I am finished with my discussion about the history of the C++ program and its basic elements. Let me pass it on now to my other members to discuss to you the rest of the topic. Starting off with Khalid Malbanos. Take it on, Khalid.
Creating a C++ program involves 3 examples of codes as well as an output with a simulation. So, for the first example in this program, we'll simply prompt the user to enter their name, ask them to enter their age, and then show their name and age. So to begin this code, we should type #include open and close bracket iOS string. This line is the header file, commonly known as a library, and the purpose of iOS stream is to provide the basic input and output services for C++ programs. For the second line, we should type also using namespace standard. We are using this line to identify the variables and functions in C++ program. For the third line, we should type integer main open and close parentheses because int main indicates that our function must return an integer at the end of execution, which we do by returning a 0 at the end of the program. The standard for successful program execution is 0, and within that function, we can start to insert any integer type of data that we can allow us to use cout and cin as well as integer variables. So far, this is the basic structure of the program. So in the first line in the 8-main function, we're going to use string for the name, a string that stores a letter and can hold any number of characters. Then our integer is age, which the variable is 0. On the following line, we can use cout to display what we'll ask the user to submit as their name, and what refer to the string name to input as cin, and as well as for the age of the user. For the last line, it displays the statement between the quotation marks and the name and age that was asked from the user. Return 0 is just a code's terminal, and we'll save, compile, and run the program to see how it works. As you can see, the program asks for the user's name, so let us put group as a user name. Automatically, the program will also ask for user age. Let us put 13 as the user's age.
Example 2. I will use if-else statements in C++ program. If-else statements, also called conditional statements, because we use if-else statement to use the condition. In this program, I am going to check the age and height of a person using if-else statements using C++. First is the declaration. Here I declare the integer, which is age, and float, which is height. Then I will output the condition, please enter the age and please enter the height. Then I will ask the user to enter the age and the height. Now, in order you to check whether the user has entered the correct age and height, I will say if age is greater than or equal to 18 and height is greater than or equal to 150. Then this is how can you declare the condition. If yung sagot mo is greater than or equal to 18, tapos sa height is greater than or equal to 150, then ang magpiprint na sagot is correct. The age and height is correct. Else, kapag ang sagot mo is hindi siya greater than or equal sa 18, automatically your answer is incorrect. Kapag isa lang ang hindi tumama sa sagot, hindi tama ang sagot mo dito sa statement na to, matik is incorrect na siya because end statement is both statement has to be true. Dapat same itong statement na to is true, then ang statement din na to is true. Para ang maging sagot natin is, para ang maging final sagot is true. Yun kasi ang end condition. So let's try to run. We input 20 and 160. So the age and height is correct. Example 3. We have a simple quiz game na iisa lang ang tanong. So we have lives na integer which is 3. And then we declare string na answer para sa sagot ni user. Tapos pinasok natin sa while loop yung lives at i-check natin siya kung hindi pa siya 0. If so, mag-run lahat yun dito kung hindi pa siya 0. Ito. Then tatanungin natin si user, what is the hottest planet? So ayun, hihingan natin siya ng sagot, then i-assign natin yun dito sa string na dineclare natin. Ito. String na dineclare natin. Tapos i-check natin if yung answer niya is tama. Kung yung answer niya is Venus, then itong magpiprint, you answered correctly. Then break. Meaning ng break is tapos na. Yun na lang yun. Else, pag mali naman yung sagot niya, kunyari ang sinagot niya is Earth, then pupunta siya dito. Else lives minus minus, which is mababawasan yung lives niya. Magiging 2 na lang. Until hindi niya ma-meet yung 0, babalik lang siya dito sa question na to. What is the hottest planet? Pag na-meet niya naman na yung 0, hindi niya makuha yung sagot, ito na ang magpapiprint. You lost, sasabihin niya. Pero pag hindi siya 0, babalik at babalik lang siya. Incrementation naman ang tawag dito. So, try natin siya i-run. What is the hottest planet? Try natin ilagay Earth muna. So, ayun. Babalik siya sa question natin. What is the hottest planet? So, ilagay natin ang Venus. Ayun, tumama yung sagot natin. Then, yun, nag-break na siya kasi nakuha na yung sagot. Yun lang.
Control structures in C++ programming. C++ provides control structures that serve to determine what has to be fulfilled by a certain program, when, and under which circumstances. Control structures exist for a reason that a program is usually not limited to a linear sequence of instructions. During its process, it may bifurcate, repeat the code, and even take decisions. In control structures, we will be introduced to a new concept. It is called the compound statement or the block. It is a group of statements which are separated by semicolons that are together grouped in a block enclosed in a brackets or braces. Here, the syntax here below shows statements grouped together and enclosed with a brackets. These statements are named statement 1, statement 2, and statement 3. We will often see a control structures that require a generic statement as part of its syntax. These generic statements can be simple one that does not require a bracket or a compound statement that requires and it's a must to enclose between brackets to form a block. The selection statement under control structures. C++ provides 3 types of selection statements. The if selection that either performs an action if the condition is true or skips the action if the condition is false. The if-else statement that performs an action if the condition is true or performs a different action if the condition is false. Lastly, the nested if-else selection statement, and it selects among many different actions or group of actions. The C++ if-else statement. This statement can have an optional else clause, and its syntax is as shown here down below. The if-else statement evaluates the condition inside the parentheses. Let us now move on to the first example under C++ if-else statement. A C++ program to check whether you or you're not eligible for voting. First thing first, we need to input the most common header for C++ programming, which are hashtag include IOStream using namespace std and int main. The variable needed here in our program is age, so we need to declare age, and the variable also needed here in our program is age, so we need to display enter your age, and the user should enter his or her age to determine whether he or she is or is not eligible for voting. The next step in making this program is we need to make our if statement or our if condition. Our if condition here is if age is greater than or equal to 18, it will display you are eligible for voting. In this condition, variable is checked. Statement will only execute if the condition returns true. And in our else statement, it will only execute if the condition in if condition returns false. And it will display you are not eligible for voting. For example, we entered 20 as our age, and it displays you are eligible for voting. And if we go back in the if condition, our age is 20, which is greater to 18, and it returns true because 20 is greater than 18, and it eventually display you are eligible for voting. In this output, the program starts, age is initialized, the if condition is checked, 20 is greater than 18 yields true, and it will display you are eligible for voting. And lastly, program will end. However, if the condition specified in if evaluates false, the statement in else is executed. Let's take this output for example. Our age here is 16, and it displays you are not eligible for voting. And if we go back to the if condition, 16 is greater than or equal to 18. It returns false, so eventually it will directly display you are not eligible for voting, or it will display the else statement. Second example under C++ if-else statement. A C++ program to check whether it is day or night using 24-hour format. Again, we'll be needing to input the most common header under C++ programming, and we need to initialize time because time is needed here in the program to check whether it's day or night. Since 24-hour format is needed, we need to display enter the time in 24-hour format, and the user should input time. The next step here is we need to make our if condition, and our if condition here is if time is greater than or equal to 6 and time is lesser than or equal to 18, it will display day. Here, if the condition, or here, if condition variable is checked, this statement will only execute if the condition returns true. This if condition. However, else statement will execute if the condition in if condition returns false, or it will immediately display night if the inputted value is or returns false. Let's take a look on this output. Enter the time in 24-hour format. The user entered 12 and it displays day. Here, the if condition is met and it evaluates the program as true, hence it displays this statement in the if condition. However, in this output, the user entered 24 and it displays night. The output here is night since the if condition is not met and returns false. Thus, it displays the statement declared on the else, which is night. As simple as that. The third example, the third or last example under if-else statement, a C++ program to find the area of a circle using radius. Again, we need to input the most common header for C++ programming, and after which we need to declare and assign values to certain variables. Our variables here are float radius, float area, and float pi. We need to declare or assign value to pi in order for the program to solve for the area of the circle. The value of pi is 3.1416. Next step, we need to enter the value of radius since the value of radius is needed in finding the area of a circle. And here, if we display the value of radius, we need also input, the user should also input radius. Again, the next step is we need to make or create our if condition. Our if condition here is if radius is greater than 0, it will immediately go or calculate the area of a circle using the formula to compute the area using radius. And the formula to compute area using radius is area is equal to pi times radius square. And after which, it will immediately display the circle with radius of the inputted radius has an area of the calculated area. However, if the statement returns false, it will immediately execute the else statement, which is error. No circle has 0 and non-positive radius. Let's look on the outputs. Here, the output here is the user entered the radius of 26. And the program displays that the circle with radius of 26 has an area of 2123.72. In this output, the if condition is met and it evaluates the program as true and directly solve for the area of the circle using the given of radius and pi declared on the inputted formula on the program. Immediately after solving, it will display the statement under if condition, which is this one. The circle with radius of 26 has an area of 2123.72. And however, if we enter the value of radius as negative, it will immediately display the else condition or the else statement, which is error. No circle has 0 and non-positive radius. Here, The condition in this output returns false because it does not meet the if condition, so it immediately jumps and displays the else statement.
In this part, we are going to do the nested if-else statement. The first if-else condition examines the gender of the player. If it is the same as the input statement, the first statement is printed. The second if-else condition is if the age of the player is qualified in the team. If it is satisfied, the second statement will be printed. So, both statements are printed because the conditions met the required output. Here, if the age is checked with less than or equal 17, it will appear in the output you are underage, and all the steps will be skipped. If it's false, for example, the age is greater than or equal 18, the else will be checked. If it's true, then the statement will be executed and it will appear in the output you are an adult. And if both of the expressions are false, the last else will be executed.
Here's a video lecture for the C++ program for loop. In computer programming, loop are used to repeat a block of code. For example, let's say we want to show a message 10 times. Then instead of writing the print statement 10 times, we can use loop. C++ for loop. Syntax for loop is for parenthesis initialization semicolon condition semicolon update, then bracket, then slash body of for loop and the bracket. Initialization initializes variables and is executed only once. Condition: if true, the body of for loop is executed. If false, the for loop is terminated. Then update updates the value of initialized variables and again checks the condition. Now for the example 1 displays numbers from 1 to 10. The program is this one. Now hashtag input, then less than sign, string, then greater than sign, then using namespace std semicolon int main, then count will display the text in the screen, which is sanaflat1, then 4 initialize I, which is equal to 1, and then condition is I must be less than or equal to 10. Otherwise, the loop will be terminated if the condition is false. If we run the program, it will be like this. There. If we use 11 here, the loop will terminate because it is false. and is above the limit of the condition. Here is the output. Here is how this program works. Iteration variable I is less than or equal to 10, then the action. First, I is equal to 1. True, 1 is printed. I is increased to 2, then and so on until it reaches 10. Then if it reaches 11, I is equal to 11. False, the loop is terminated. Next one is C++ program to display a text 6 times. Now this is our program, the code for the program. I'll skip this tree. Count this text, "Thank you sir, flat 1" will be displayed in the screen 6 times. Then 4 initializes I, which is equal to 5. This will be the initial starting number 5. Then condition is I, which is less than or equal to 10. This will be the endpoint or the limit. Then same as true with the example 1. If the initialized value of I is greater than the condition, it will terminate. Count will be, the text in the count is "Thank you sir, flat 1." This is the text that will be displayed in the screen. Here is the output, but let's run it in our C++ program. There, 6 times. But if we use 11, it's like the first example, nothing is going to appear, it will terminate. This is how the program works. Iteration variable I is less than or equal to 10. Action. Fifth, I is equal to 5. True. Then "Thank you sir, flat 1" is printed. I is increased to 6, and so on until it reaches 10. And once it reaches 11, it will terminate. The loop will terminate. The last example. Example 3. Find the average of n, or the natural number. The num will be the initialization, then float input, sum equals 0, then average. Count the text here will appear on the screen, then another count here, which is how many numbers will you average. This is a question. Then this question will ask you how many data are you going to input for finding the average, which is seeing would be the number or the number of the data to be computed. Then out, input the given numbers. press enter after each number. Here, you're going to input the data or the number of data you are about to compute based on how many numbers you will average the question here. Then for the initialized number, will be 1 and I must be less than or equal to num, which is the condition. Then Cin will be the input, then sum, it will then compute the sum of the input, then average, the formula for average is equal to sum all over the num. Sum will be the number of or the total sum of the input of the data, and then over the num of how many inputs are we going to compute, then count. Average is equal to the computation. Then the average will be displayed on the screen. I'll show you some example. How many numbers will you average? I will put 4. Then I will put 2, 3, 4, 5. That will be the 4 inputs or the numbers you are about to compute for the average. After pressing enter, the average will show on the screen. Average is 3.5. That's how the for loop works on computing the average. This is another example for computing the average. C++ program to find the average of natural numbers, positive integers such as 1, 2, 3, so on, and are known as natural numbers. That's it.
If the counter is 3 equals to 0 and the counter is 5 equals to 0, the count and the counter is divisible by n and counter. And system pos equals to 0. Write out all the numbers between 100 and 500 that are visible by 3 and by 5. This is 100 to 500 interval. We are really going to iterate it through all of the numbers of this interval, and we are going to do that using while loop. And then for each of those numbers, so for each value or number of our counter, we are going to check whether that counter value can be divided by 3 and by 5. And if yes, we will write out that value if. Now we are just going to continue to the next iteration. So as I already said, we are going to use while loop to solve this problem. And we are going to start our while loop with the counter value of 100, and each iteration we are going to really increase the value of our counter. So 101, 102, and 3, and we are going to stop the execution of the while loop when this counter value comes from 100 to 501, which means 500 value of the counter is going to be our last iteration through our loop. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to really declare a variable that is going to hold our current counter value. So I'm going to call it int counter like this, and initially I'm going to set the value of our counter to 100. Okay, so this is our initial value of our counter, and then let's see what is the syntax of while loop. So we rewrite out like and execute, then in this race here, so in this curly brackets we are put which block of code of our while loop is going to execute while this condition here is fulfilled. And let's now fill this parenthesis here. So as I said, our counter has to go from 100 to 500, which means since it starts on 100, we have to say to our while loop that execution of this block of code here really has to stop what our counter comes to 500 or 501 or 500 is still valid. So that we are going to say it like this. So we are going to say counter like this, and we are going to say there are two ways to write this condition. The first one is to say while our counter is less or equal to 500. You could also well said that while our counter is less than 501, so that is valid situation. While executing our loop, so the while your counter is less than 501 or while your counter is less or equal to 500, I prefer it in this way, but whichever way you put it is going to work. So now that we have put this condition here, we really can write out this code that comes in the while loop block. So we are going to execute while condition. Here is the true going to be following inside this block of code. Here we really have to check whether our current value of our counter is divisible by 3 or 5, and if we have to write out the number to our user. If now we just need to continue to our next iteration of our loop, and how we can check whether this counter value can be divided by 3 and by 5 we use. Include IO stream using namespace std_int_main or .code. Just run the cout arm bacon is end, and then now say the value of bacon end line. So now if you were go ahead and run this, would you write 20 times? How would we go about doing? Well, sometimes people do want loops that never end, but typically you want to only have this code run like 5 times or 10 times or 15. How do we control exactly how many times it runs? Well, in order to do that, we usually add a line of code. Like again, this test is going to do bacon less than or equal to 5. Since the value of 0 right now, this test will always going to be true. So in order to make this test falls in the loop to stop running, we need to change the value of the bacon at some point, so it is equal to 5 or greater than 5. In order to go ahead and make bacon equals to bacon plus 1. Now each time we run loop is going to go and do its right thing, and then it's done. It's going to add 1 to the value of bacon. So the first it runs, it's going to be 0, and then it's going to add is 1, and the rest 2, 3, 4, 5. When the times it gets to 5, it's going to change the 6 to 6 and not run. So let me go ahead and show you guys. So to 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. So we already know that bacon is rain In this case, when bacon was equal to 0, it was less than or equal to 5. Bacon is 5, so I'm going to print our bacon to 5. Finally, 6. Alright, I'm going to add 1 to the, so now become equals to 6. Alright, let's try this loop again. Like I said, this 6 is error, like it's not running. So like I said, and when okay, take a break. Like the first example I told you, but typically, and I want 95% of the time, people build loops that they only want to run a certain amount of times, example 5 times. In this case, you would add something called this line right here, and this pretty much just changes the value of bacon. So some point the test has 20 times, you will go ahead and then just change that to 20 and check it out. Bacon is 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. All the way to the pretty cool. So you can change how often your loop runs by a couple things, its starting points and ending. How much you increment that value by, again, you can add 3 to each time if you want, and then you get something like this: 1 add 3, 2, 4, 7, 10, 13, 16, 19, and when you added 3 to that, it was 22. Well, 22 is indeed not less than or equal to 20. So that's when it stopped the loop. So the basic of the while loop, again, all the while loop does is take a certain bit of a code and run over and over again until the test is false. Okay, for example number 3, include iOS string using a namespace std int main close open int x equals 1, then int number equals to 0, int sum equals to 0, while x is less than to 5, or the count is, you may input any value of end or number in cin this code, some of these numbers unless and until I don't mean disobey this condition, which is x is equal to or less than 5, right? So I will say this condition, and the sum here is, I will say the sum is equal to which is our variable is name. Okay, so this loop will ask 5 times to enter the value, and once this value are entered by the user, then it will take the sum of these values and it will print it here, or otherwise you can show the sum outside the loop so that you can have the sum only once, but not 5 or 6 times. Let's try and run this program once again, and it says input any value, I will enter, and once it's asking me input any value 20, once again 30, 40, and 50, and press enter, and it says the sum is 150, right? This should be equal to that's why it's showing us a plus sign here, but this should be ideally equal. So in this way you can take the sum of the value using while loop, okay? Or otherwise, if you want while you do never end, you can give some condition which will be fulfilled. For example, you can just write something like this while 1. So generally programs use it make an infinite loop. Just compile the program and run it and says please enter any value, and we keep on entering values and we never end because this one or while loop or one is never ending. You can also never go out of this loop. Okay, so I will keep on entering the value and it will never end. So if you want to make infinite loop, just make it like this. Otherwise, just make a loop which have some condition, and loop can exit when that condition is met. Okay, so in this way you can use while loop in C++.
Nested loop means a loop statement inside another loop statement. So there's an outer and inner loop for nested loop. Here, we have syntax for nested for loop, while loop, and do while loop. For example number 1, we have this code, and when we run this program, the sample output will be like this. We enter number 4, then we form a triangle shape wherein the number of stars is increasing in each level or rows. Simulating this program, ang unang gagawin natin is writing the preprocessor directives, which is the hashtag include iostream, then using namespace std or standard, followed by int main, open and close parentheses, then bracket. In writing the body of code, we declare int I, j, and rows. Using cout, we display the quotation statement. The user were asked to enter the number of rows and stored it in rows using cint. In this program, we use nested for loop. In the outer loop, we initialize I is equal to 1, I is less than or equal to the value of rows for the condition, and I++ for the increment. Sa inner loop naman, we have initialize j is equal to 1, j is less than or equal to I for the condition, and j++ for the increment. Tapos sa inner statement, we use cout to display the star when the condition is true. If it is false, magpo-proceed siya sa outer statement, which is the end line, then another iteration again in the outer loop. So here's the table for us to easily understand how the program works. For outer loop, the first iteration is I is equal to 1. Then it checks the condition. Here, 1 is less than 4 is true. Therefore, it will proceed to the next step, which is the inner loop. In the inner loop, we initialize j is equal to 1. Then it checks the condition again, wherein 1 is less than or equal to 1 is true. Then i-print niya ngayon yung star. Tapos magpo-proceed siya sa second iteration, which is j is equal to 2. Checks the condition, it is false, meaning mag-i-stop na siya, then pupunta siya ngayon sa outer statement, which is i-end na niya yung line, then proceed na siya sa next line. At yung value ng I ay mag-a-add ng 1. For the second, third, and fourth iteration, ganun din lang yung mangyayari. And for the fifth iteration, pag di na niya na-meet yung condition, at-terminate na yung loop. For the second example, we have this code, and when we run this program, ang output niya ay tatlong 1 sa first row, tatlong 2 sa second row, then tatlong 3 sa third row. In this program, we declare int I is equal to 1, n is equal to 3, and k. Dito, we use nested while loop wherein the outer loop has a condition that I must be less than or equal to n. So sa unang iteration, ang value ng I is 1 and n is 3. So therefore, the condition is true. Then, magpo-proceed na siya ngayon sa inner loop. wherein it checks the condition again that k must be less than or equal to n. Here, we declare that the value of k is 1 and n is still 3. So in the first iteration, the condition is true. If the condition is true, it prints the value of I, which is 1. Then, mag-a-add ng 1 yung value ng k, so magiging 2 na siya. It checks the condition again. It is true, then 1 is printed and k is increased to 3. Kapag nag-false na yung condition, it will proceed to the statement of outer loop, wherein it will end the line and the value of I is increased to 2. Then ganun ulit yung process until mag-for yung value ng I, kung saan mag-false yung condition, which means the loop is terminated. So we have this code for the last example under nested loop. Dito, magkapares lang sila ng code ng example number 2. But in the inner loop, it prints the value of x when the condition is true. So when we run this program, ang output niya is 3 rows that contains number 1, 2, 3. Sa process ng outer loop, same lang sila ng previous example. But in the inner loop, the condition is that x must be less than or equal to n. So, in the first iteration, the value of x is 1 and n is 3. Therefore, it is true, then it prints the value of x, which is 1. After that, x is increased to 2, then it checks the condition again. Then, paulit-ulit lang yung process until mag-false yung condition.
Array in C++. An array is a data structure that stored an element of the same data type sequentially. A C++ array has a fixed size. There are two types of C++ arrays: the one-dimensional array and the multi-dimensional array. One-dimensional array, it is an array in which the data items are arranged linearly in one dimension only. It is commonly called a 1D array. For example, in the first line, including the IOStream header file in our code, it will allow us to read from and write to the console. In the second line, including the std namespace so as to use its classes and function without calling it. In the third line, calling the main close and open parenthesis function inside which the logic of the program should be added. In the fourth line, start of the body and the main close and open parenthesis function. For the fifth line, declaring ang array name age to store 5 integers. The 5 integers has also been initialized. For sixth line, create an integer variable x using a for loop. For seventh line, the beginning of the body of the for loop. For eighth line, using the loop variable x to iterate over the values of the array age and print them on the console. The new line character and prints in new line after every iteration. And for the ninth line, end of the body of the for loop. And for the last line, end of the body of the main close and open parenthesis function. The next type of array is the multi-dimensional array. This array is which the data items are arranged to form an array of arrays. A multi-dimensional array can have any number of dimensions, but 2-dimension and 3-dimension arrays are common. Under multi-dimensional array, we have 2-dimensional array and 3-dimensional array. First is 2-dimensional array. A 2D array stores data in a list with 1D array. It is a matrix with rows and columns. Example on how to initialize and traverse a 2D array. In the first line, including the IOStream header file in our code, it will allow us to read and write to the console. In the second line, including std namespace so as to use its classes and functions without calling it. Third line, calling the main close and open parenthesis function within which code should be added. Fourth line, start of the body of main close and open parenthesis function. Fifth line, a comment, the C++ compiler will skip this. Sixth line, declaring a 2D array of 3 rows and 2 columns. Items have also been added to the array. Seventh line, a comment, the C++ compiler will skip this. For eighth line, creating a variable using for a loop. This variable will iterate over the row indexes of the array. For 9th line, creating a variable j using a for loop. This variable will iterate over the column indexes of the array. For 10th line, the start of the body of the loops. For 11th line, print the values of the variables I and j on the console inside square brackets on the console. For 12th line, print out the value is stored in the index I and j of the arrays A. For 13th line, end of the body of the loops. And for 14th line, the main close and open parenthesis function should return an integer value if the program runs fine. And for the last line, end of the body of the main close and open parenthesis function. And for 3-dimensional array under multi-dimensional array, a 3D array is an array of arrays. Each element in 3D arrays is identified by a set of 3 indexes. To access the elements of 3D array, we use 3 for loops. For example, in the first line, including the IOStream header file in our code, it will allow us to read from and write to the console. For second line, including the std namespace so as to use its classes and functions without calling it. For third line, calling the main function inside which the logic of the program should be added. For fourth line, start of the body of the main function. For fifth line, declaring a 3D array, name of size is 2 by 2 by 3 by 2. The values of the array have also been initialized. Sixth line, accessing the item stored at the index 0, 1, 0 of the array and printing it on the console. For seventh line, accessing the item stored at index 0, 1, 1 of the array and printing it on the console. And for the last line, end of the body of the main function.
Program creation that allows practically can be done through different programming language, putting into skills and techniques to actually provide a functioning program. One idea that might be actualized is a program that eases students' academic constraints. Research is a part of academic life of every student. The time and effort poured into gathering and compiling data from a small-scale sample does not actually compensate the analysis that can be gathered from the sample. The program for this proposal project solely and purposely worked for this research chapter through C++ programming language because of its high-level control over system resources and memory. Although it is more widely used due to compatibility. By actualizing this program, the students' academic difficulties specifically in conducting research, would possibly be lifted because of the automated feature of the program.
Objectives are important in every proposal project to assure that the efforts and time to be poured for the project will create progress in any aspect it might be in. For this project, the proposal aims to create a program that will create an easier access of the data collected, guide the researchers to make the presentation of the study more dilated, automate the process of gathering and compiling data, and lessen the time consumed in gathering and compiling research data.
The way to actualize this program that gathers and compiles research data is through the C++ programming. This supports multi-paradigm programming, which means that single paradigm programs are collectively created to concurrently execute the code of the program and form a whole functioning system. Different techniques and systems are incorporated to run the stated idea. Codes that incorporate if-else, loops, and arrays will be introduced to run the program. For the if-else part, this will be used for the questionnaires, in which if the item has not been answered, users can move on to the next item. In loops, looping will be used in item per item or question per question codes which supports the if-else part. And for arrays, this will be used to store data into one variable, such as demographic data and level of measurement data for the questionnaire, and this then will be used for compilation of the data. Besides these stated codes to be incorporated, logical operators and different elements of the programming will be used in gathering demographical data from the users. Program code is needed to be changed for different set of questionnaires to provide other questions for researchers. In this aspect, the program allows modification anytime. These are the parts that are needed to put the project into reality. Fundamentals programming class unveiled a modernized world to me, learning that we can actually create programs that lessen hassle and make things in an instant way made me dive into the idea that the world has been continuously evolving and can be technologized in just a split second through studying the programming languages that are freely accessed by anyone. The lessons from this class are taught well, which struck my curiosity into how technology or just the programs and applications work. The processes of programming a high system applications which are actually used in different activities of the world, incorporating varied elements, techniques, systems, which with precision of details caused me to think highly of programmers and the people behind this field. Enrolling this class and learning different elements of the computer programming has widened my knowledge in computer aspects. Beyond that is now my ability to understand the difficulty of the process of continuous modernization of the world by people behind the field. I, Syra Bambico, respect the people who do not settle for the traditional and conventional ways, rather believe that there are still efficient upgrades and modification for this world.
Studying C++ programming for a SEM really gave me a lot of lesson. And I think it is safe to say that I learned a lot, and because there are a lot of it, I can't even mention them all. But here are the most important lessons I learned in this subject. First, now I know how every software and applications work, and it is through those programs and codes inputted, compiled, and executed in a certain programming tool. And the other lesson I learned is that programming is everywhere. It is everywhere in the sense that it is very useful for our day-to-day living, and it's all because of those programs created to make our living easy and convenient.
Good day to everyone. I'm here to give my reflection about our subject, computer programming or computer fundamentals and programs. As the innovative and transformed how students learn in 21st century, this also enhances the computer literacy of individual. In line with this, the computer fundamentals and programming class have unveiled to me a modernized world that is of great help to humanity. Learning that we can generate programs that lessen the hassle of various tasks and instantly create things made me dive into the idea that the world has been continuously evolving and can be technologized in just a split second through studying the programming languages that are freely accessed by anyone. Moreover, lessons from this class have been taught well, which stoked my curiosity into how technology, particularly how programs and applications works. Furthermore, the process of programming a high system application which are used in different activities in the world incorporating various elements, techniques, systems with the precision of details made me think even highly of programmers and the people behind this field. Ultimately, enrolling this and learning different elements of the computer programming and languages has widened my knowledge in various computer aspects. I am now able to further understand and realize the difficulty of the work of the people that continuously aim for the modernization of the world. As such, I, Carl Zeus M. Antiporda from BSCE 1A, sincerely respect the people who do not simply settle for the traditional way, but rather believe and work for technological advancements, for the sake of the convenience of the people and the betterment of our world and society.
First and foremost, computer programming is a very important subject that everyone must learn and realize its value, especially in this age of technology. In this sense, I find computer programming as a difficult, challenging, yet fun subject. At first, you will experience difficulties in creating programs, but when you are eager to learn something, then all things will be possible. Furthermore, I realized that being a programmer is not easy. It needs a high level of logical thinking in order for us to become a programmer.
My reflection about computer fundamentals programming. First of all, that this course makes me feel good owing to the fact that all the subjects is hard, but this subject I make out excitement but mixed with Twitter because I expected that our major subjects to be more difficult now. I believe this topic, computer fundamental and programming, would be simple for me since I had background in the field of computers. And because the specialty I picked in high school was ICT. But I was mistaken since what I had studied previously was not in the center of this topic. This subject was very challenging to me for the reason that if I don't improve my study, I can keep up and I can fail. So I have to study hard to pass this subject. I know this subject or topic is really complicated and perplexing, especially in programming. It's simply an error that made when I inscribe the code. It will result in a mistake, but the help of our subject teacher give us to improve our knowledge to his subjects for the reason that he perfectly demonstrate or explain to us. But now I see that this topic has a significant influence on our lives, since it helps a lot to solve problems in human life, and especially in this generation, many people are aware of technology advancement, and I believe that many will be inspired to learn how to program.
As a student who can encounter a programming subject, it is very challenging and I enjoy it. I have learned many things and I can also apply it to real life situation. The biggest lesson that I've learned and I really like: first, I should identify what really is the problem, and then I have to think what result I want or what I expect. and then create a solution for that problem. I can use many tactics just like those features in C++ programming to solve my problems. If one didn't work out, then I can retry and use other tactics just to solve that problem. Until I solve that problem, it doesn't matter how many times I fail. So the point is, achieving success comes with having a freedom to fail.
Programming is difficult and challenging for me because you will think harder to identify what is the problem and how you will solve it using different solutions. But this subject teach me a lot of lessons that I can apply to the real life situations. The thing that I learned to this subject is no matter how hard the problem or situation, there is a solution to it.
Programming is an amazing and at the same time mind-blowing. It is not so easy to understand, but it focuses as it is manipulating them into using different codes. It gives me a sense of accomplishment needed to overcome the challenges bring. Learning syntax for programming language is quite exciting. It enhances my abilities and capabilities to think outside the box.
To be honest, I assume this subject will be simple for me since I've always liked computers since I was a kid. I was truly expecting this subject to be more focused about Microsoft Word, PowerPoint presentations, and anything else connected to create a visual presentation. However, I was surprised to hear that we will be discussing the different significance of this topic, which exceed my expectations and express my curiosity in learning more about it. But I'm still thankful because the more difficult the topic becomes, the more knowledge I gain. And the most important thing I have learned in this subject is to try to overcome my limits. Even if your goals aren't working, don't lose hope because progress takes a lot of mistakes before you achieve success.
My reflection is that within this subject, I thought it was just that easy to cope up, but even from the start of the lesson, it makes me mad a bit because of the programs that is hard to do. I don't have any experiences or knowledge about programming, that's why this subject is hard for me. Nevertheless, I also gained some knowledge about the topics being discussed in our semester, and very thankful that even if it was hard for me, I still managed to find ways how am I going to surpass the lessons or topics.
I learned a lot in this subject, but because I am not a skilled programmer, I sometimes struggled with the coding portion. Nevertheless, despite the fact that I've struggled with this subject, it has assisted me in improving my critical thinking skills, and I am grateful for this subject since I can still understand methods to grasp everything. The knowledge I've learned on this subject is priceless and appreciated. And I am indebted to our instructor for paving the road for our study of this subject, which will lead us to our goals.
In the past months since I started encountering the subject Computer Fundamentals and Programming, I found out that programming has a wide scope in the field of computers. This subject has let me understand the real purpose of creating programs. In my own experience, I wasn't expecting that I was going to study computer programming, in which it has definitely gave me struggles and complications at the start. But that didn't stop me from surrendering. Instead, I tried to motivate myself and accepting that this is an opportunity for me to understand better the essence of the subject. Now, I understand how the process of computer programming language works. And I do believe that this will going to be useful in the future, especially because not too long from now, our modernization will going to evolve, and with the help of programming, this will be my tool in creating a more useful type of programs in my career. Thank you. And that is all for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching and keep safe. Bye bye.